Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this amazing webinar episode, Restrictions into Opportunities, How to Make Your Restaurant Succeed, brought to you by Restaurateur Connection and sponsored by HungerRush. This is the very first episode of our series. We've got a lot on our plate, and it's also the first episode we have on this website, Restaurateur Connection. So thank you all for supporting us for this first episode, and you're in for a great webinar. My name is Julie Lawson, the webinar coordinator for this episode, and I'm excited to bring you some hard-earned insights about running a restaurant in these crazy times. Before we go any further, I want to thank our sponsor, HungerRush. HungerRush is a scalable restaurant technology designed for stellar guest experiences. HungerRush offers a fully integrated restaurant management system that lets the restaurant own the relationship with their customer by mastering operational efficiency, creating awesome guest experiences with ease, and squeezing customer data for every drop of insight. The easy-to-use, highly configurable system includes digital ordering, loyalty and rewards, delivery management and support, takeout and curbside communications, no-contact capabilities, and reporting and management. Also, you can focus on doing what you love, serving great food. HungerRush helps restaurants compete in the toughest business on earth. There are a ton of options. Loyalty is hard to get, and preferences are changing fast. Their vision is to be the leading restaurant management system built to optimize customer engagement and effectiveness of operations, and their mission is to empower restaurants with technology that showcases and improves their guest experience. And I know restaurants need empowerment more than ever, so thank you, HungerRush. So today I'm talking to Joe English and Patrick Cottrell. After 26 years of selling food and liquor, Joe leveraged his experience to help those in the hospitality industry. His passion for clients helps them every day in the success of their business, helping to create new jobs and opportunities for others. As a regional director at Sculpture Hospitality, he has taken on every challenge that comes his way with the same enthusiasm and energy that he delivers to his client base. Patrick is managing one of the fastest growing markets and operating multiple territories. He is constantly building and growing his team of franchises to ensure the success of restaurants across Florida, while also tossing a little friendly competition amongst other franchises. Patrick comes from a strong hospitality background, spending most of his career at the executive level in both front of house and back of house positions. As a prior restaurant and bar owner, he understands the importance of keeping margins tight. So these guys really know what they're talking about, so we're in for a great episode. So without further ado, take it away, gentlemen.
Thanks, Julie. I could probably speak for Patrick and I both. We're excited to be on the webinar with you. Hopefully our audience will be able to get some nuggets out of what we have to present. Just a few things. We've got about 4 different main topics that Patrick and I are going to talk about today. We're going to dive into some planning and preparation. And, we certainly know that during these times that is certainly changing. We're also going to talk about simplifying the menu. Things are very different than they were a year ago. So we've got to take a look at what we're offering to our clients, our customers. And then also a new thing that's out there. It was pre-COVID, but it's front and foremost now is structuring your to-go station. We see a lot of good opportunities in that area. And then staffing and retraining the staff is another key component, as well as technology. So a lot of new technology coming into play right now. And so we'll spend a few minutes talking about that as well. So with that being said, Patrick, should we jump right in and start to talk about planning and prep?
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Joe. Patrick Cottrell here. Thanks again for everybody on this webinar. As you go through the dynamics of what's going to happen next with your restaurant and preparing. Here I'm from Florida, so Florida is pretty much open, but the other states that are out there, we know that you guys are struggling with your business right now. And one of the key things is understanding now how to maximize your profitability. And one of those is to plan and prepare effectively. It's interesting as we talk to specific clients throughout our days and weeks when we're out in the field. As owners of restaurants and bars or hotels or what have you, essentially what's happening is understanding where your money comes from is very, very crucial, especially coming back into the game of things. You want to look at how many chairs and tables you have. Do you have enough seating to achieve your financial goals? The idea is to understand how much money you can actually make with the seating and the facility that you currently have. You want to look at your operational hours of conducting business. During those operational hours, are you filling all the seats with your patrons? This is very, very crucial to see. Like if you were just to draw out your map or your seating chart, very often we can use technology like Open Table out there or HungerRush to essentially dynamically change the platform of your restaurant with the seats. But you can calculate how much money you can get from each dining experience for time of service. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so on and so on. You can easily track how this looks and plan to implement a strategy to fill those times, especially the off time. We'll talk a little bit about takeout, but essentially if your restaurant, bar, or facility or cafe is not fully booked, you got to think about ways to draw those particular patrons in. Evaluate your guest count. So look at your head count, see what their spending habits are, and how long do they spend time in your establishment. Very often we see coffee houses where this is a great spot to do work, on the computer for sure. But are you really turning tables to make more money? So in that type of establishment, you might want to look at ways to think about maximizing profits in a different way, different upsellings. Are your guests only buying an appetizer or are they also having a full meal? You want to look at that because maybe your appetizers are too big. So everybody knows, yes, value is great. But if someone's coming in and only spending $12 on an appetizer and they're not moving on to an entree or a second appetizer, you want to really look at those particular things. Understanding the type of guest that is visiting your restaurant, this is pretty big because their spending habits and what they can spend right now is going to be crucial for planning and preparation. Then we can look at staffing. Are you staffed enough or too much? As an example, I was at a restaurant maybe Saturday, and they were understaffed. And I understand why, because there's different capacity levels with curfews. But if you're understaffed already, but you can fulfill your seats, then the guest experience is not going to be there to satisfy your guests. With one bad experience from a guest, it can really, really hurt your business. So staffing is crucial, but you also want to look at how you're spending that money. Is it unnecessary, or do you have too much staff for business volume, or do you have too little? So it's something that you really, really want to look at. By evaluating those 4 steps, you can calculate out to maximize your profitability. Looking at your tables, looking at your operational hours, analyze your guests and your staffing. If you put that in a matrix, plan it out just like a pro forma, you'll evaluate your business. You'll be shocked sometimes to see that you're not maximizing your profitability. And or you could say, hey, I could just do these little things in order to make an extra crunch of that cash flow that flows in. Joe, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, Patrick, one of the things that you talked about was getting the butts in the seats throughout your open time. And here in my market, I've seen some people be very proactive, some of the restaurants, in terms of limiting the time that people actually have. Might be an hour and 15 minutes or something like that before they're going to actually ask them to kind of wrap it up and move along. Honestly, in today's environment, I see the customers understanding that. They don't feel rushed out of it, but they understand, they're there trying to help the restaurant stay open by providing them the business. And they understand because they know up front, they maybe only have an hour and 15 minutes before the next turn on that table. They're willing to pack it up and go when the time comes because it's all part of just trying to support that restaurant. So I think that those are types of things that pre-COVID, nobody would have ever considered that side of it. This is certainly different times that we have to kind of approach.
Yeah, that's great. One of the other things to add is in hotels, one of the biggest reliance of knowing how their profitability is going to be is the occupancy rates, right? So if you look at how focused they are on occupancies throughout everything. So a hotel will gauge how much staff, even in their restaurants or their bar, they're going to have by their occupancy rates, right? If people aren't coming in off the street. Think about that as you move forward and you start to reopen your restaurants, or maybe you're open. Think about that just in general with occupancy rate. Your restaurant, your table, your bar, establishment, cafe, or whatever it may be, everything has an occupancy rate. So if you evaluate the same thing within your table matrix, your operational hours, that's going to be the key. Hopefully, you guys got some good nuggets out of that.
So, Patrick, I will say that the next slide is simplifying your menu. You're the expert here, so I'm excited to hear what you have to say about some of these things as well.
Great. This is interesting. I have a chef background. I'm a chef by trade, but worked my way through every level of the kitchen, whether it be a dishwasher. I was peeling potatoes when I was 14 years old. Now looking at all of our clients and what we do on a consulting level, pre-COVID and after COVID, we've seen some large menus out there. And when I say menus, we're talking books sometimes. That doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, but one of the things that we're going to talk about in this particular section is cross-utilizing your ingredients, looking at your past purchases and think about those rather than purchasing things that aren't going to sell. What are your guests' favorites and using daily specials, and then getting creative. One of the biggest things that I see when I go into most restaurants and bars is that either they're running out or they have too much of something or their products are going bad or they're 86ing things. If you ever wonder why your food products are spoiling or you have to throw them out, perhaps like a bottle of wine that you couldn't cross-utilize for a sangria of some sort. As owners, we often want to let our staff be creative. And that makes total sense, right? Especially in the creative culinary world and or in the bar, especially with the crafty cocktails. We want our staff to be creative, and our guest experience likes that as well. But it's one of the things is to look at your menu in the perspective of a business owner of profitability. If you're focusing on your stars of those items that move, this is where you're going to really, really progress in financial stability as you're opening up after COVID. Look at cross-utilizing ingredients. So I'll give you an example. If you have salmon on your menu as an entree, don't just use salmon as an entree. If you're buying whole salmon and you're breaking it down, make a ceviche out of it, have a tartare on the menu, make a salmon burger, these type of things. If you're bringing in a product, think about how many ways you can use it on your menu. It's interesting that you can take an item and be creative throughout the entire process of the menu, from appetizers all the way to the desserts, by utilizing specific menu items. For instance, if you brought in, let's say, fresh honey cubes, right? If that honey is only being used for your cheese plate, think about other ways. Maybe you can add an appetizer with it, or charcuterie board, and multiply and use it in ways that you can actually use it. In that case, that item's not going to spoil. But if you have fresh seafood, anything like that that's going to spoil, you might as well put it throughout your menu, cross-utilizing it. Minimize the menu to your guest's favorite. Probably everybody's been into a chain restaurant recently where they've really, really shrunk down the menus. What they're doing is they're looking at the last few years worth of volume and looking at their guests' favorites. They're going to keep those star items on the menu that they know that they're not only going to sell the most of, but they're also looking at food costs. So it's the same thing on the beverage side. If something costs 50% margins or such, or your margins are too high, we're not talking about lowering quality. We're talking about having the items that are going to sell the most, that are going to make you the most money. That's the idea. That's what you're looking at. So when you're looking to narrow down your menu, look at the items that are going to sell out. If not, bring in specials. Let your chefs be creative, but bring in specials that you know that are going to sell out within that perishable date. If a fresh seafood item has 3 days, run the special for 3 days. Don't run it every day, or run a special for the entire month. So then that way, every time that you're bringing it in, you're selling out. Chances are, unless you have a regular that comes in every week, you'll have a flow of clientele that comes in. They're going to see the special, and it's going to be special to them because they were in last month. look at streamlining that. With that, the menu, when you're downsizing it, your labor cost goes down as well, because you no longer have to have a whole prep crew that's prepping all these food items for an entire book of menu, when you can downsize it to the selling points and then streamline that profitability there.
And one of the things I'd just jump in with is you talk about the chains and things like that, simplifying their menu. But from what I've seen, a lot of people just really focus on that kind of the 80-20 rule, right? Where you've got 80% of your sales coming from essentially 20% of your items. I've got clients that have just really trimmed down and said, look, we're only going to have those 20% of the items that are generating our revenue. And just like you said, it's the rest of it we'll push through specials if we need to.
Absolutely. On the beverage side of things, really understanding what you're using, what you're selling is crucial. Very often the back bar is loaded with product, right? And I like to look at it as professionally, I like to look at it as liquid cash. If you're losing any money behind your bar or in your back of the house, that's your profit. So maybe think about being creative and having your staff sell it off. Instead of the happy hour items that are your main staple items, start utilizing the items that aren't going to sell. Maybe do if there's a bourbon that's been sitting there for the last year, do a barrel aged or do a keg infusion and sell it. The guests like these creative things, but you'll actually get it out of there and you'll actually make profits off of something that's just sitting there on your shelf.
That's a great point. And for me, I've pointed out with some of our clients that we consult with that exact thing, where those are dollars sitting on the shelf. And wouldn't they rather have had those dollars sitting in their bank account during shutdown times or different things like that? Seeing a lot of creativity with, flights. You talked about bourbon. So I've got a client that has a pretty extensive list, but they're doing some really unique things with flights. And most jurisdictions that I know in the states that I'm oversee and have contact with, they've gotten really creative, and the legislative bodies have gotten friendlier in terms of to-go items. Got one client here locally that literally has like mason jars with just a top on it with to-go drinks, their craft cocktails and different things like that. It's really about getting creative.
Excellent. We can move on to restructuring a to-go station to simplify how your guest experience can be on your to-go level of service, which is interesting. With the kitchen background too, you'd be shocked how a to-go volume that increases can really cripple the guest experience that's sitting and dining because of ticket time. This is one of the things that we're going to talk about, but essentially on the to-go station is, or just accessibility and finding ways to upsell and get more product out your door without just the standard seating, is finding that balance, making it more efficient, find your space for it, especially because I don't know if you've seen some of these franchise restaurants out there like Chipotle. I'm sure everybody's gone into a Moe's or a Chipotle of some sort, these to-go quick service concepts. They've actually restructured their entire kitchen. Partly the reason why is because if you have your same staff preparing all the food that's on the line and all the new Uber apps and DoorDash, the influx of volume there is huge. So what they're doing is actually giving the entire own station in the kitchen to facilitate these orders. In fact, I recommend dedicating, whether it be customer service oriented people on the phone, staff in the kitchen, maybe finding a prep area in the back where they can prepare these foods to go without disrupting your normal guest experience. Because now you want to actually influence the way of doing business to make more money. So if you can create an environment where you can do quick service out of your restaurant without crippling your ticket times, that's going to be huge. All the time you're going to see this, but this is the opportunity right now to really, really capitalize it. We want to think about a few things too, looking at what the to-go containers look like, right? Very often, if you're inside your establishment, a to-go container is different than maybe the experience when you're ordering to go and you're getting that. What do you think, Joe, on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like even the slide that we're looking at here, and it's got the nice paper bag with the handle and things like that. There's one thing to go home with something like that or have an Uber Eats drop it off versus just your regular plastic bag from your supermarket. I mean, it's a very different experience. And I think that people really need to understand that the experience doesn't, especially now that we're in the to-go era, it doesn't end with the customer walking out the door, or sometimes the customer never even comes to the location. So what do they really want to remember that food by? And are they just putting everything all together, or are they separating it out and so that things don't get soggy? Different things like that obviously have to be considered now. A couple of things that you brought up, Patrick, that I think is really key is I've seen that firsthand where a guest experience has suffered as me as a customer, and I'm told, well, our kitchen's overwhelmed because of all the to-go orders. Well, it's a good problem to have, but it's also something to keep in mind to solve. I've seen also just the influx, especially during, say, dinner times and different things like that. You've got all the Uber Eats drivers and things like that coming in. You almost have to have a staging area just for those folks, so that they're kind of going to one side and waiting away from the rest of your guests so that isn't impacting in a negative fashion as well.
Yeah, that's great. Society now, it seems like we are all about convenience, right? So in a restaurant, as you're allowing these delivery style services, it's creating convenience, whether you're creating it within your establishment where you're doing delivery and those such, or you're having where Uber Eats and the DoorDashes come and pick up your food. It's really creating a whole new streamline of revenue that the restaurants haven't seen. Well, they've seen a little bit of it, let's say 2017 and on, but now it's very, very, very structured to where if I'm at my house and I want to spend time sitting watching TV, I'd much rather do that and be with my family in an environment where I can have the same hot, tasty food from my local favorite restaurants rather than having to sit in a 30 to 45-minute waiting line in order to get sat. Certain restaurants are only allowing certain capacities. This is huge because you essentially could actually have full capacity or more capacity without seating everybody because you're flying food out your door for takeout.
And to that point, we're talking to people all over the country, so there's a lot of different restrictions and different levels of lockdowns, and I understand that. But at the same time, I've seen revenue actually exceed last year for some clients because they've absolutely nailed this part of it to where their to-go is making up for the lack of seats that are occupied because of restrictions.
Absolutely. To make a little bit of note there is just think about, too, if there's so much business being sent out to these third parties where people are coming up and picking up the food and delivering it, perhaps looking at creating your own delivery program. Now, there's probably liabilities there for sure on the driving aspect, but if the specific companies are charging 30% of what the sale is for that item, it may be advantageous to look at structuring your staff that can, now that maybe got furloughed, to then start delivering food on your behalf in your restaurant or bar that could just increase the margins because you're not spending so much on the third-party apps.
Definitely. Staffing is always such a challenge. Even pre-COVID, it was a challenge to find, the right people and have the, people fully trained and things like that. Some of the unfortunate reality is that the staffing is going to be very different when places are reopening. People are going to need to be basically retrained a lot of times, or you're going to have a whole new influx of staff that, unfortunately you weren't able to keep on during the furloughs. And so I think that one of the keys here, if I would speak to it, is just that really focused training and even retraining, even the bartenders or the kitchen staff that you had for years, unfortunately with a few months off or more, can pick up bad habits from even just pouring their own drinks at home. Certainly is a different experience than at the bar. Some of the stuff that I see also is really the need to cross-train the staff. Most places, if the volume isn't there, people are wearing a lot of new hats and different hats that they haven't worn before. I've got an example here in the Midwest where I had a fairly large group that was coming into town pre-COVID. They had done all their hiring. They were slated to open right as the shutdowns happened. They had projected and they had hired for approximately 30 in terms of management, full-time management people. They brought back when they were able to actually open less than half of that. So, when that happens, it's not like that banquet manager goes away and there's no banquet. So obviously they're very different now with different restrictions and sizes, but somebody else has to fill that role, and it might be somebody that's never done that before, never has had that level of planning and execution to keep that calendar and keep the staff moving where they need to move. Anything that you have on this one, Patrick?
Yeah, I really believe cross training is key. In fact, even pre-COVID, I've always been very, very big on cross training. One of the things is believe it or not, when you really get to know your staff and you create a culture within your staff, don't just be a boss, be a friend, understand their goals within the hospitality industry. Cross training, believe it or not, can take someone from one skill set to another and not even realizing that as an owner, how much influence that you've made on that individual. If you think about it, if you have a prep cook or a dishwasher and that's what they come in to do, I know it. I saw it firsthand where, yes, we have great dishwashers and we have great prep cooks, but if the dishwasher sitting there and they're on their headphones and they're playing whatever, they're just hanging out in the dish area, have them start learning a skill on the prep level. Believe it or not, from my experience, they're some of the best prep team members that you'll ever have, and then they've created a new skill level, and as you do that, you're bringing them up in the industry and changing their lives and their family's lives. And I'm really big on that because I came from a background where I remember that if you wanted to be the grill cook, if that guy takes a day off, you better be ready to jump on the grill and be able to be prepared to do that. So nowadays, I think it's a little different. It's not so aggressive. I think moving people around in stations in the traditional kitchen, whether it's the fry station or the saute station or the grill station, can only benefit on all levels. If someone needs a day off, and we know this, right? Staffing's huge. When someone gets sick and you've only trained one guy on the saute station, your restaurant is crippled at that point. So instead of hiring two saute cooks and one only getting 3 days a week and the other one getting X amount of shifts, depending on lunch or dinner, having the guy that runs the fry station knowing how to saute is great, because now you can stagger in times. If you're not busy from 4 to 6, let's just say, then there's no reason why you need the grill cook there, the saute cook, and the fry cook there all at the same time when someone can do the rest of the job. And believe it or not, the skills that you're going to help those individuals with will be good. I even think of it as the front of the house, back of the house thing. There's always been, from my experience, this little barrier line between front of the house and back of the house. Well, I've always believed in breaking that barrier and having the front of the house do some of the work of the back of the house and vice versa. When I worked for Darden, opening concepts for them years ago, it was interesting because utilizing the manager's skill level was one of the most focal points, where if you're a chef in the kitchen and you're opening that kitchen, there's no reason why you can't open up the front of the house and get the entire front of the house staff up and running instead of having a front of the house manager and a back of the house manager there at the same time, stagger them in, then you essentially can have less payroll and more efficiency throughout your whole entire establishment.
The thing that I would piggyback onto there, and I think you nailed it, that I think is so often overlooked, is what you're doing for that person for their future. I mean, when you're tapping into the dishwasher and putting them into prep and cross training them, I mean, you're showing that you believe in that person. And a lot of times, you've had it to where that's the spark that inspires them to carry forward and have years in the hospitality business, and maybe even have their own place. Every owner that I've ever spoke to has a story like that, where somebody thought, hey, what, this person is being underutilized and I'm going to help them out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a culture. I believe that if there's, or let's just take it this way, as long as the bar staff is giving really, really good customer service and being able to be attentive, I'd rather have 1 or 2 bar staff making more money than having 3 or 4 there where nobody's making enough money. So same thing in the back of the house.
Sure.
If someone could do multiple jobs and be okay, I would rather pay them an extra $2 an hour than paying an entire another staff member $15 an hour, for that matter, when I can pay someone else to be successful in what they're really wanting to do. So I also look at not only the skill level, but the eagerness to be there and wanting to be there and the hard working. I think that's super important to realize, because your staff is going to market your venue, right? So you want to make them happy. Right. You want your staff to promote and bring people in. There's no doubt about that. When they're having a great day on the job, then you're having a great day, making money. I can guarantee that.
Absolutely. And just think where you're positioning yourself once the restrictions are off and things are back at full capacity and things like that. At least if you're taking away one nugget, to me, okay, we're all in challenging times. What can we take away that's positive? And if we can take away a better structure for our business, or a better culture, the things that you're talking about, those are wins. Those are wins that wouldn't have happened unless we have these challenging things going on.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah, I think moving into the technology piece would be good too.
So on the next one, adopting new technology, this we could probably, when Patrick and I were talking about this, we could probably spend an entire webinar just on this. So we're just going to kind of hit some highlights. But the thing that I would say on this, we're talking about time management, inventory, online ordering, and recipe management as our highlights. But the thing that I'll say about this is that the technology isn't going away. It's only coming faster, and there's going to be more of it. If you think about QR codes at the table and things like that, those aren't going to go away as restrictions go away. The only thing that I would say on that, though, is that as the restrictions go away and maybe your demographics start to change about who's coming into your establishment, think about if they're not used to that. Maybe they're staying home right now because they don't want to get out and be exposed to a lot of people. But I would say it's going to have to be a healthy balance once the restrictions are off, to be able to go, okay, we've got these new things, but now we've got this whole new batch of customers that aren't used to QR codes right now and things like that. Patrick, what are you seeing? You're heavy on the kitchen side. What are you seeing in terms of like the restaurant or the recipe management and things like that?
So, yeah, I mean, there's so much technology. One of the things just in general for, like you mentioned, online ordering and contactless ordering and these type of things. I mean, the sponsor, HungerRush, they essentially have a great platform to provide for that. There's no doubt about that. The idea with the POS and being a one-stop shop is great. In the recipe management, this is crucial, because if you have dishes that you're preparing and or recipes behind the bar that have uncontrolled food costs or cost of goods, it can get out of hand pretty quickly. So having a recipe management and inventory management program, I could be a little biased, but Sculpture Hospitality, this is one of our focuses with inventory and financial analysis and recipe management. It's one of the key points, because in a restaurant, not only if you're in a restaurant that give great customer service and you just love people, but you make money from selling goods and services essentially, but those goods have a cost. So if you're selling something at under cost and your margins are not going to be there, and we kind of talked about it in the very first section of this webinar, if you're not focusing on what the cost of every item is, you want to rethink that, because every item that's put out of the kitchen or behind the bar has a cost that you've just spent your money on. So as you spend money, the goal is to make money, and that's why everybody's pretty much in business. The number one way of evaluating that is through inventory management and recipe management. I couldn't stress that enough, because then, of course, you need a great POS system in order to deliver, a product quick enough to the kitchen and understand it, quick online ordering, those type of things. It's very, very, very important.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you. And given a number of my clients talked about dead stock and refer them to blog articles that we posted through Sculpture Hospitality, or, generating reports for them that will help them identify things that haven't moved for months and what can they do with specials on that, and, start to turn that dead stock into actual dollars that they need to operate.
Yeah, I'll give you one of the largest things pronounced thing that when I go into a restaurant that happens, or a bar for that matter, hotel, when it comes to setting up their inventory management or their recipe management, is the generic mod keys, right? Believe it or not, no one realizes how much money they're losing with generic mod keys. And I'll give you an example by that. So if you're drinking, Macallan 30, very expensive stuff, right? So if you're drinking Macallan 30, and let's just say it's $50 a drink, or $25 a drink for whatever the price may be, and you hit a rocks key, okay? Mm-hmm. 98% of the clients that we go into has a generic $2 or $4 key, an upcharge. So they call them upcharges. Really look at, when it comes to inventory management and recipe management, look at those costs, because when you have someone that realizes that they can come in and drink a larger size pour for a very, very discounted price, they're going to do it all day long. So you don't really do that in the kitchen. You never see that in the kitchen. You'll never see a generic button. If you have an upcharge for steak, you're upcharging steak accordingly to what the cost would be, right?
That's a really good point.
Yeah, so it's going to mesh in. So if you get a Caesar salad and add steak, it'd basically be like you're getting a steak salad, right? So the costing around that is derived because there's a reason for a theoretical number versus an actual. But behind the bar, we see all the time where you're ringing in a Tito's and you ring in rocks, and it's the same price as if you were to ring in a well drink and hit rocks for $2. Think about that when you reopen, or if you're already open. Look at your inventory management program. Look at your POS systems and see if, when it's set up, it's itemized enough for you to capture more profit accordingly to a theoretical and actual food cost or beverage cost. That's one of the biggest things that I would say.
I think that's a great nugget to kind of leave us off at. I like that.
Yeah, like I said, technology is huge. Some are great, some are not great, but there's a reason why it's there, and efficiencies are huge. So if you can utilize technology, I can tell you, I would never. In fact, I go in and I see people using, not people, but like restaurants and bars, their staff doing inventory on a pen and paper, that's so time consuming. There's so many tools out there. I think Waffle House still does it, believe it or not. Waffle House still takes every order on a pad and paper, right? I mean, that works for them because it's quick service and what have you. But with new technology, I'm sure that could be more streamlined with just ordering right at the table, like you said, with online ordering in the apps. So that's pretty much all I have. I mean, I would love to hear some comments or any questions that anybody has.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you guys so much for that amazing presentation. So, to dive into some questions here, we've got one from Celeste, and she's asking, how do you see best in class in addressing alcohol beverage sales with to-go?
I think a lot of that, from my perspective, is based on the local jurisdictions and things like that. Most places, most markets that I'm involved in now has to go, but it's very specific and situational as well. I mentioned the place that I've got that has a mason jar that they can go to go. I've got places that have styrofoam cups that's not attractive, but they do. And so at the same time, there's some other markets that I'm very aware of out there that it's very strict in terms of a single serve, and it's how are you packaging it, that it needs to be in like a sealed bag or different things like that. I think you can still present a brand, you can still present an image. Do you want a bag that goes out that has a sealed top, or do you want that styrofoam cup? Same thing with, do you want your logo on it? Do you want to drop in a coupon, let's say for $1 off on your next to go drink? Things like that to bring people back as well. I'm not sure if Patrick, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, actually, so I'm seeing it quite often in Florida market. A lot of the clients are doing it very, very well, actually. Many of them are getting logoed cups, and they have the little seal machine. Kind of, if you've ever been to a boba tea place, they seal the top of the drink. Well, you can get that machine very, very inexpensive. And what we're seeing is they're giving the nice, sleek glass with logos, and then what they're doing is essentially they're calling like a cocktail on the go for your to-go process, but you would want to make sure you let them know that it's better to serve it without ice. And here's the reason why. You don't want to condone them taking it in the car, popping a straw in there and drinking the cocktail. So what we're finding is that the item would have a receipt, would be sealed, and it would be able to be taken home, opened up, and ice added. And or let's say the Mexican restaurants are solely focusing on 2 or 3 to-go margaritas, or their specialty cocktails specifically to go, or full bottles of wine or bottles of beer. I do see that it's possible that this is going to go away, though, once the pandemic is no longer around.
Locally, I know our restaurant association is really a champion for continuing that. So I think that's where, it's going to matter, is getting involved in the grassroots local level to have your local legislators take a look at how they can continue to move this one along.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for answering that, guys. Next one we have is from Kathleen, and she's just asking for tips for planning staff more efficiently.
Patrick, you want to go with that?
Yeah, I would say if you go back to looking at cross-training your staff, this is big, but planning to staff them, I would say definitely make sure you're finding hours of operation and how many team members do you need to facilitate a smooth operation during all of those times. And there's many staffing softwares out there that you can utilize from the technology piece, and you can plug those hours of operations in and how busy you think you're going to be. And it kind of will generate how many people you'll need per shift. And that's another thing, going back to preparing and planning, is really understanding a pro forma of your business. How many staff members you need to facilitate that business is going to be big. So I would say just really laying out hours of operation. Think about if you need a person on the grill station here, how many tables per server are you going to need? Then you can look at, the new technology with the QR codes and ordering online that HungerRush has. Essentially is maybe you're not going to need as many servers as you will if they're going to order things right from the table. So it's really just understanding the time matrix and how many stations you need to fulfill during the day.
All right, excellent. Question is from Kevin, and he says, while I love the idea of cross-training employees, how do you recommend keeping morale when you're cutting staff at the same time?
That one is the challenge for sure. And I think that really it's about being upfront with everybody in terms of, look, this is where we're at. A lot of things are out of your control in terms of the mandates are coming down and coming fast and furious, and you just have to react, unfortunately. I think that you'd be surprised at when you're involved in the cross training and people are coming to work, the staff that you do have, and they're learning new things. It motivates them to come into work, and they're excited to learn something new, and they're going to be, more receptive to the understanding that the challenges in terms of the hours and things like that are available might change, but they're being challenged in other ways. That's where I would go with that. Patrick?
Yeah, this is a hard decision on every owner for sure. And there's so many things that are out of your control sometimes that if the volume does not present itself to lend yourself to have enough payroll, you'll have to really look at those individuals that are loyal, willing to show up on time, and really begin to value those attributes and hope that you can encourage those that stay on with you and work hard, that it would become a morale boost. That because very often we work around people that don't pull their weight, and that's the reality of it. So it could help engage the morale within your establishment by sometimes having to make those hard decisions with the ones that aren't. And sometimes that will encourage your staff.
All right, yeah, absolutely. The more stock you put in your people, the more they're going to rise to the occasion, for sure. It looks like that's all the questions we have for today. I just want to thank our guests, Patrick and Joe. I want to thank our sponsor, HungerRush, and of course, all of you for attending. My name is Julie, and you can find Restaurateur Connection on Twitter at Restaurateur_C. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Julie, thank you.